live reaction to the birth chart of Kendrick Lamar. And I wanted to do Kendrick specifically because number one, I really admire his work so much as a writer, but also he's just having a really great moment in his career. And that's actually what prompted me to go and have a look at his chart the other day, just very briefly after his incredible Super Bowl performance, to see what his sun, moon and rising were, just out of curiosity. But I wanted to actually do a sort of quick fire, deeper reaction to his chart today with you all. And so what I'm going to do is just cherry pick out the energies as I move through his chart from his ascendant all the way up to his last placement at his midheaven here, and just give my thoughts in terms of the energies that we can see, or the themes even that we can see expressing through his career and what is known publicly of his life. So let's start with his Libra ascendant. Libra is strong Libran energy is really common in artists, but also people who are concerned with justice. And so a lot of lawyers as well as musicians will have strong Libra placements. And the reason that this energy features so prominently in those kinds of people is because Libra rules harmony. And that is both in terms of the harmony that exists between people, but also musical harmony. And if you listen to Kendrick's music, you can see that he uses harmony and harmonics, layering his voice with his own voice or with other artists really, really effectively. And he's also someone that I think has a reputation for justice for his culture, particularly the hip hop tradition. If you consider his beef with Drake, a lot of that centers around who really has the right, or who is just to be expressing and I guess contributing to the hip hop culture. And I think reading between the lines of what he's written and also said publicly about his spat, if you will, with Drake, is that he thinks there's some kind of injustice in the way that his culture is, from his perspective, being potentially appropriated by someone like Drake, who he has actually labeled a colonizer in some of his music. It doesn't surprise me that this is a theme that we can see so clearly in his music and in his opinions around life and culture and his community, because it is his ascendant. And the ascendant in astrology, it's also called your rising sign, is something that tends to be very visible in your personality, not just to people who know you, but it's kind of the way that you dawn on the world, the way that you're perceived by the world at large. Oh, okay, I can see in his first house. So the ascendant is the beginning of the first house in astrology, and it's a house that is a house where you have energy placements like Pluto or Pallas. These are energies that tend to be really visible in someone's personality. And unfortunately for Drake, Mr. Kendrick Lamar has a very determined, resourceful, deeply passionate group of placings in his first house, being Pluto in Scorpio, which is the planet that rules passion, desire, endurance. It almost has an erotic need to be in pursuit of a goal. It kind of discovers itself through its desires, and it drives to move toward what it wants. And that is very closely conjunct the sign of Pallas Athena, also in Scorpio. And so when you have these two planets close together, it suggests someone that is very passionate about what they do and is extremely resourceful and persistent, because Pallas Athena is kind of our intellectual resources. It's our ability to strategize and to use what we have to move forward in this world. And both of these placements being in the sign of Scorpio, which is, as I said, it's a sign that is all about persistence and drive and resourcefulness and almost kind of a ruthlessness in a way, like a single-minded focus in moving toward the pursuit of what it is that they desire. This is not a person who is going to be comfortable coming in second place. And it's also a person who is going to be very willing to look at perhaps the things that are hidden or obscured or maybe are a little bit darker to speak about. And I think there's some very famous lyrics in Not Like Us that would allude to such themes. So yeah, if I was going to have an argument with someone in public, I would not want them to have this placement in particular, because they're probably willing to say and do what they really think they need to do in order to come out on top, to tell the truth, basically, because Pluto in Scorpio, as well as Pallas Athena, they're very interested in what is actually lying underneath the more surface levels of human behavior. And so if we keep moving this way, we can see, oh, he's got Sagittarius, Saturn in the sign of Sagittarius in the second house. So speaking of truth tellers and determined people, that's again energy that we can see here in his second house. The second house in astrology is the resources that we have at our disposal to move ourselves forward in life. And Saturn is the taskmaster in astrology. It's about discipline. And a bit like Pluto is also about persistence. But where Pluto kind of has this ability to kind of draw forth from the underbelly what is actually underneath, the persistence that Saturn shows is more through discipline and rigor and tough love and hard life lessons. So this is a person who is just going to keep moving relentlessly toward what they want. And when you combine it with the energy in their first house, they're going to be almost obsessive about what it is that they love and feel drawn toward. He has Uranus, which is the higher expression of Mercury in astrology, and Mercury, which is up here in Cancer for him. Uranus being in Sagittarius, along with his Saturn, this is the sign of the truth teller. It's the loudmouth. It's the tell it like it is, come in with a blunt, thrust of truth and just kind of, rearrange the status quo by actually saying the unspeakable, or what has not yet been said, or saying what has not yet been consciously articulated, because Uranus is where we connect to our intuition, and it's also ideas that are still coming into being. And so for me, if I knew that I was looking at a musician's chart when I was giving someone a reading, if I saw Uranus in the third house, which is our house of communication and local neighborhood, I would say that this is someone who is going to innovate in the way that they express themselves. It's going to change the status quo. And in terms of, I think, making his imprint on the hip hop culture, but also black politics in America, and being an advocate for his community, which I'll definitely talk about when we get up to the top of his chart, this is someone who is going to leave their mark through their communication style. Absolutely. I see here too, he's got a fifth house moon. And so your moon in astrology is your emotional needs. It's the sign that it's in tends to be the way that people who know you best would probably see you. And for him, it's in the sign of Pisces, which again, for me, is always associated with expression, transcendence, humanity, artistry, but it's a very kind of spiritual way of approaching those things. He has a spiritual need emotionally to express himself, and he also probably has a really strong need in his relationships to almost melt into the person that he loves or that he's chosen to spend his life with. He needs a really deep emotional bond that almost kind of has a feeling of being one mind or one soul split between two bodies. The way that this energy can express, in a more negative or shadow expression, is someone who isn't great with boundaries. And I don't know a lot about Kendrick's personal life. I believe he has a partner, but I'm not really sure of the details. This might be someone who actually has troubles with potentially codependency or setting healthy boundaries, or understanding really where he starts and stops and someone else begins. And where you can see a Pisces moon playing out negatively in someone's chart might be around things like addiction, whether that be, particularly given that this is his moon in Pisces is in the fifth. The fifth house also rules impulsiveness, gambling, addictions, and sometimes, because that Pisces moon placement can be an incredibly sensitive energy, you can see sometimes, and I'm not suggesting this is the case with Kendrick Lamar, I have no idea at all about his history or opinion of alcohol or drugs, but what you can see with someone with this placement is addiction issues. And what they actually need to do to healthily express that placement is to instead find either a spiritual or creative outlet that actually lets that emotional need be met for that person. Oh, interestingly, he has his North Node in Aries, and that is a very different energy from his moon sign, which is emotional needs. So your North Node in astrology, it is basically the esoteric evolution that your soul is seeking in this lifetime. And when you have a North Node in Pisces in the sixth house, this is a person who is seeking real self-definition in this lifetime, someone who wants to, on a day in, day out basis, feel totally self-possessed and to be a pioneer and to go first into the unknown and build something new that people can then follow in their footsteps afterward. And that energy is probably a little bit at odds with his emotional needs. So he might often feel a conflict between the emotional need to kind of connect and bond and have that spiritual transcendence with his relationships versus a day-to-day need to be totally self-defined and kind of headfirst into his daily life in the work that he does, because the sixth house rules daily work, routines, and habits. So we might see someone who's had to do a little bit of work around finding a balance between these two very dominant but in some ways conflicting energies in his chart. He's got Gemini in the 8th house. I think Kendrick Lamar is the quintessential Gemini. His mastery with words and communication is just, I think, absolutely unmatched. Listening to his music, the first time you hear a song of his is honestly just a masterclass in what it means to be the consummate Gemini, because his ability to find the right words to give expression to sentiment and to do it in such a rapid way. It's my understanding that he wrote Not Like Us in a very short amount of time, I think less than 24 hours, and the amount of words and ideas that he expresses in that song, the speed at which he has pulled it together is such a Gemini thing. He also has his Venus, which is rules creativity and self-worth and value. And he has Vesta, his sense of home in the world, and Chiron, which is where we are wounded, in the 8th house. And that says to me that this is a person who probably has known a fair bit of pain in this lifetime and has had to learn to overcome that. The 8th house can be a little bit intimidating in astrology because it is the house that is ruled by Pluto, which is what we were speaking about back here. And it rules birth, death, transcendence, alchemy, going down into the underbelly of life and kind of working out the difference between me and you, or self and other, and also what is mine and what is yours. And so when you have a lot of placements in that house, this signals to me that this is someone who might have experienced wounding, possibly around finances or some kind of deprivation in that area of his life, or in relation to his community, because Gemini is the sign that rules the local neighborhood. And if there's one thing that comes through so strongly in Kendrick Lamar's work, it's that reference to Compton, the neighborhood that he grew up in, and he's a very proud advocate and leader within that community. I believe he still lives just around the corner from where he grew up. And so the fact that those Gemini themes are coming through so strongly in his work is just, that's part of what he was meant to express and experience in this life. He also has a lot of placements, including his career sector, in the sign of Cancer. And where Gemini rules the local neighborhood, Cancer rules culture. It's almost a more tribal identity. Cancer rules in-group and out-group theory. So it's very much, if you think of the Cancer being ruled by the crab has a very hard shell around it. And it's very clear, what's inside the crab's shell is very soft and gentle and vulnerable, but it creates a very firm boundary between self and the rest of the world. And so it's actually really funny that he's ended up writing a song called Not Like Us, because that is possibly the most Cancerian on the midheaven musician thing you could possibly imagine. And also I've noticed as well, a lot of musicians actually have very strong Cancer placements. Taylor Swift is one. It's a sign that's very emotional. It's ruled by the moon, and it's also in his 9th house. And that is the house of publishing and sort of mass media communication, the one-to-many style of communication. And his Mars is here too, which is your passion and your motivation in life. And so this is a person who really has a need to advocate on behalf of his community, on behalf of those that he sees as belonging to his group. And when you place it with that Libra ascendant, which is about harmony and advocacy and justice, and you also couple it with that Pluto in Scorpio, and you go back down to that Saturn in the 2nd house, this was not a person who is ever going to take lightly to perceiving someone else as exploiting their community or their culture. And the fact that he speaks so highly of Compton and is very committed to supporting and I guess improving the lives of people that he sees as belonging to his community, which not only is evident in the way he is still involved with the community of Compton, but the way he speaks about Black politics in America. This was always going to be something that he would feel called to do, and it's a very authentic and aligned energy for him to embody. So that is a quick fire look at Kendrick Lamar's birth chart. I hope I did okay. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. This was my first one. Thanks for listening.